Hello, Lindsay. How are you today?
I'm good, Sarah. Thanks for having me with you.
Yes, I am so excited for us to have a conversation today about all things nutrition.
Yeah, well, I'm your girl for that.
You sure are. And that's what I love about what you do. And so I'm going to have you tell our listeners just a little bit about how you got into what you do and actually how do you help student athletes?
Sure. So I am a registered dietitian and a certified specialist in sports dietetics. So sports dietitian for short. I have worked many, many years at the collegiate level, employed by a couple of different universities, Florida State University, University of Georgia, University of Texas at San Antonio. And I've always worked, with nutrition, but for athletes and thinking about how to fuel for better performance. Currently, I own my own business. So I do work with a lot of college athletes, but I also work with a lot of high school athletes
Mhm.
and some adult athletes as well. Um, and what I do in my own business, Sarah, is I actually specialize in helping female athletes specifically.
Yeah.
And within female athlete nutrition, there is a lot of disordered eating, eating disorders, underfueling, issues with menstrual cycles. So that's kind of like my specialty. I always say that I help female athletes overcome disordered eating and use food as fuel to perform their very best. And so to summarize and answer your question, how do I help student athletes? It's like, well, if we're addressing the nutrition, whether they're a student athlete in high school or in college, we're helping them be better athletes, be better people, and set themselves up for success.
Yeah, and I love that so much because we all know in this industry of high school athletics, college athletics, food and nutrition is one of the number one things that these athletes struggle with.
Yeah, I think food, nutrition, like mental health and academics, right? like
Mhm. Right,
like most
right.
student athletes have the athletic part down.
Mhm.
It's everything else. In high school, we struggle because that's the time where we're just kind of becoming aware of nutrition. So which is there it's an interesting time because in one sense it's a time where you can finally learn nutrition and have it help you, but in another sense we also have a lot of factors and forces that might be influencing us maybe in not so good way. That's where we become
Right.
very body aware, body conscious, maybe diet aware when we're in high school, so that can lead us astray. And so we definitely have that concern in high school of just lack of knowledge, or are we getting the wrong knowledge.
Mm,
And then in college, we have the issues of nutrition of, oh my gosh, I have to feed myself, eat on my
yes.
own, make my own decisions, do my own grocery shopping, or you're at the hands of a dining hall, which could be great or could be terrible. You could have buffet style, you could have, which has its own issues. You could have a dining hall that like every swipe or point or dollar matters, and then you're afraid to spend money. And there's just so many variables in college and your schedule, fuel timing. So, that student athlete in college, we really struggle with nutrition on so many different levels too.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something you actually mentioned, two words together. And as we're talking about learning about nutrition for high school athletes, moving to that collegiate time frame, I have seen a lot of athletes, in particular female athletes, struggle with disordered eating. Now, that's
Yeah.
backwards than what most people hear. Most people think about like eating disorders,
Mhm.
but they're not one and the same. And so I want you to kind of talk about that a little bit so our listeners can kind of understand when we use those terms and we think about what these student athletes are going through, how can we better educate them in both of these senses?
Yeah. And I think I'll start by saying that both are really important to address. Both are serious,
Mhm,
and both require getting help. You
mhm.
know, I think in a clinical sense, and an eating disorder is something that is more clinical, and like we have, there's certain diagnostic materials
Right.
too. And with that, one of the diagnostic criteria for an eating disorder is actually classified as a mental health disorder.
Mhm.
Um, so so in one sense, you can almost think, well, an eating disorder is, maybe I've got air quotes around this, but like maybe more severe.
Right.
Um, but we still see it happening in athletics because there is a myth that like you can't have an eating disorder and be an athlete. And it's like, oh, yes, you can, because it might present itself differently. You're not going to be a good athlete, but,
Right.
but you might
Right.
still be able to hide it, or it might present itself differently. Like I think if some people hear that word eating disorder and they're just thinking of somebody who's very sick and in a hospital, like, yes, that is real, but it's also somebody who's, still actively playing and that maybe they shouldn't be, but they can be. So, there is a difference in diagnostic
Mhm.
and severity. What are the metabolic and psychological consequences of an eating disorder? But with that said, there's still a lot of people with disordered eating, right? We're
Right.
just kind of flipping those words,
Yeah.
which means our eating is still not something that is normal or optimized. And we might be having some issues, like we have low energy.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not starving ourselves, but we have very low energy and we're getting hangry all the time. And we have weird habits around food of what we
Mhm.
will and will not allow ourselves to eat or on what day or at what time that doesn't make nutrition easy and normalized.
Yeah.
So this disordered eating can still really disrupt somebody's life, their social life, their relationship, their sport performance. It can still be very, very disruptive.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that we need to talk about because I think we want parents and coaches and, family members to really be aware of these certain things that happen because, that disordered eating could lead somebody down into having a
Yeah.
clinical eating disorder. But it all comes back to the baseline of how does nutrition impact our athletes, especially those who want to play at the collegiate level?
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said that, the thing with disordered eating is it could lead to an eating
Mhm.
disorder. Oh my goodness, what's the saying? If I had a nickel for every time, that one of my clients said, like, well, it all started like
Oh,
innocently. I was
right.
just trying to be
Right.
healthy,
Yeah.
or I just heard that I shouldn't overeat carbs. And so I started reducing carbs. Like it can all start so innocently and it
Yeah.
can really disguise itself as being healthy. And it can really in sport disguise itself as being what an athlete should do,
Mm,
like, oh, I'm just going to cut out sweets for my performance. And it's like, okay, that sounds like a decent like thing. Like, yeah, maybe I don't need that much ice cream. And then, but these are just things to be cautious of and pick up on or really challenge or dig deeper. Like, do you need to cut out the ice? Are you having any issues? Or do you just like,
right.
is that you
Like
like the ice
what's
cream and you're performing great? So what's the problem?
yeah, what's the switch that like makes you have that thought? And I think that's what I love when you talked about it is like this is all intertwined with mental health. And
Yeah.
we talk a lot about that on the show, just how because it really does impact an athlete's performance level.
It does, absolutely. And so why is this so important too? Because if, one, nutrition can help you be a better athlete, it help you, run faster, recover stronger, adapt to your training better, have more energy, build stronger muscles. Like so nutrition is something that can help you. But when we also tie it into mental health, it's like if we are over concerned about nutrition, if we're
Mm,
over stressing it, if we're spending too much time calorie counting and not focusing on our game, if we're spending too much time being concerned about how we look on the field or on the court and not how we're playing,
yeah,
then you're not being the best athlete you can be either because nutrition is taking, your mental space.
right.
It's supposed to be something that helps you physically, but if it's taking away from you mentally, you're not being the best athlete you can be.
Mm. And, those are the conversations that I think sometimes we shy away from because these these actions, if you will, of someone's disordered eating and the habits that they start to build, again, it manifests itself as it's actually, oh, this is what athletes do,
Yeah.
or this is what I've heard.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
what are some things, and I'm thinking from, parents who are listening, how they can get involved with their student as they're kind of going through this, because I can almost imagine, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but if that really starts at a younger age, at that, ninth, 10th grade level, how does that really impact them long term? What, like,
Yeah.
what are those things that they're experiencing that they might not reach their highest potential athletically because they're not feeling properly?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to try and give advice to parents because, like we said, that starts young. Probably most parents can relate to some of this themselves, or maybe
Right.
parents haven't figured out this whole nutrition thing themselves either. So, especially if we're thinking about the current student athlete population in high school or college now, their parents are in their mid 40s and 50s. Am I doing my math right?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
And they were people exposed to the big diet boom of the 80s and 90s and Atkins and South Beach and only eat one egg a day type of messaging because of cholesterol, which is like so disproven now.
Yeah.
I really apologize for my dogs making noise in the background, by the way. They woke up right when we started this conversation.
It's okay.
So to get back to, our parents, what can they do? I think one of the very first things that a parent can do is actually, just take a deeper look at themselves. And I'm not saying that every parent has problems, but just start being cautious of your own language or your own messaging or your own actions
Yes.
around food. I think that's really important because it's going to be really hard for you to, encourage or sway or teach your high school or college um, child how to fuel if you're not necessarily doing it right. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying that you have to, where as parents, like, you can't be the picture perfect model for everything, but to at least say, like, you know what? I might not be doing it right, but Stacy, like, you're an athlete, you're 17, you've got different needs than me. And I think it would be important if you did put more carbs on your plate. I'm doing something differently for my own reasons, but this is what I think for you. And so just I think recognizing differences too is really important. So just being cautious of your own messaging and behaviors, and then recognizing that your child's needs might be very, very different than yours. Get help if you don't know what the heck to do. I mean, that's why I'm here, right? That's
Right.
why
Yeah.
dietitians available is to get help. I just started working with a young 13-year-old the other week, and it's like her parents are just like we know nutrition for us, but we don't
Ah,
swim as much as she swims. Like, I
right.
don't know what she needs, and maybe I'm not buying all the stuff in the house that she needs. And so, just getting a sports dietitian to work with can help you with that. And you know what? That's one less thing on your plate as a parent.
That's right. That's right. And I love that so much as you're talking about it because, we always say like get help if you're like want to take your speed a little faster. You're going to do some
Yeah.
strength training. You have a coach. Every athlete has a coach that walks them through the specific things they need to do to become a better athlete. A lot of times, and we do this academically too, is we don't put academics, mental health, nutrition, we don't put that in the category of also needing a coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And knowing that that's something that you're able to do is because you're able to really like dive deep into these student athletes lives because bio individuality is such a big thing. What
Mhm.
Stacy on the swim team needs is going to be totally different than say Sarah on the soccer team.
Right.
And we've got to nail down how they process food, what that looks like for them, and also their environment. And I
Mhm.
think that's what I love about having parents involved in saying,
Mhm.
look, my life may look a little different right now, but my needs are also different.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's what's really cool about, I offer a few different ways that I can work with clients. But it does come down to, I think, individualizing teaching is very important. There's
Yeah.
so much just misinformation about nutrition on the media, on social media, and student athletes are on social media a lot. So they're getting a lot of bad nutrition information. And so just countering that, providing correct education.
Right.
We don't get that in school either. Like maybe you get like, cooking class or like health education, but like you're really not getting nutrition in school.
Right.
Um, unless you major in it in college. So yeah, like the education is a big piece. And then it's that coach to say, okay, you've got a game this weekend. How are you feeling prepared? Or where is it? Are you traveling? What time is the game at? What time is the racing? Okay, so we need to eat a meal at this time. Like you need what do you want to eat? Like, let's talk about
Mhm.
it now, and just kind of coaching through that.
Yeah.
Meal timing can be so important for athletes. Can be, is so important for athletes too. So that's why I think the coaching aspect, like education goes a long, long way, but having actually somebody to really like guide you through game to game or season to season is just a really nice feature.
Yeah. Yeah. And I go back to my own experience. My friend and I who played high school soccer together, we joke about this all the time is that like, we didn't really know much about nutrition. I'd grab a Pop-Tart on the way out the door and be like, this will be okay. Like, we'll figure it
Yeah.
out. But then, you get to that moment, you're so depleted and you don't have the energy, like you're talking about, like that energy level, because, that food is fuel.
Mhm.
But I also think about, as I walk through my experience of seeing my teammates, some of them would be able to eat 30 minutes before a game and be totally fine.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, I needed a good 3 hours. Like, I was like, I can't eat anything 3 hours prior to, because, who knows what it was, but there was just something I was like, I'm going to be sick. Like, it's just how
Yeah.
it is. And, your digestive system works so different than everybody else's. And I think that's a good point that you brought up, is saying, like, we don't really plan for that sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and then there's certain sports too, like, or you have tournaments or like track. I do work with a lot of track athletes, and it's like a track meet. Like, you think you're gonna run at noon, who knows what you're gonna
Right,
run like
right.
your day and tournament weekends and stuff like that. Like, it gets so screwed up. So really understanding, like, how do I fuel myself for this entire day that's gonna work for my body, that I can digest it. It's gonna sit well. So that actual like performance fueling, I think, is really
Yeah.
important. Day to day fueling for every day and for training is super important. And then the actual like for the game, for the match.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's always fun to figure out.
Right. And so, what are some things, I'm thinking of parents and students that are listening and they're thinking, yes, this makes sense. I need to do something, but they don't know what to do. They don't know the next right step. What are some resources? Or do you have anything that we can share with our audience so that they can see, like, here's kind of the first step I need to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly, I'll share my website, which is
Please.
riseupnutritionrun.com, which doesn't mean I only work with runners. It's just the acronym, Rise Up Nutrition, RUN. So riseupnutritionrun.com. I do have some blogs and some free resources on there too,
Right.
some like free sample meal plans. And I'm not saying that that's going to be perfect and individualized for you, but it could be a decent starting point. Um, I am also a member of an organization that's called CPSDA, the Collegiate and Professional Sports Dietetic Association. And I want to give them a shout out for a moment, because if you go to their website, which is sportsrd.org,
Mm-hmm.
they're an organization for sports dietitians, but they do have free resources and handouts for student athletes or for parents. I mean, they have a handout on like specifically nutrition for soccer players
Oh, I
and
love that.
nutrition for volleyball players and nutrition for recovery. And they have a handout on fueling on the go and while traveling, and on an airplane and stuff like that. So they have some really great handouts that are free that you can download on their website. So that's sportsrd.org. So that's as far as like kind of, I think both of those resources, my own and this organization for education, is good. And then of course the next step is, reaching out for personalized or individualized help. There's many sports dietitians out there.
Yeah.
I do want to recommend looking for a sports RD,
Mm-hmm.
RD for registered dietitian. Um, some people might go by the name of nutritionist. Sometimes I call myself a nutritionist, but just to be clear, like, I do have those credentials behind my name,
Yeah.
because the word nutritionist isn't actually something that's regulated. And that's why there are so many nutrition coaches, health coaches, and you want to make sure they are an RD, a registered dietitian. And if you can go that further step to say sports RD, you're really going to get what you're looking for to play at a high level. There are certainly some great dietitians out there that aren't sports dietitians who can help somebody, fuel for their first couch to 5K. But I do want to say, once you're playing at a high level and training 10, 20 hours a week or more,
Yeah.
like, you want that sports RD. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I help with for sure.
And we'll be sure to include all of those links in the show notes with some really great resources for parents and students to download. Because, a lot of times it's taking that first step. And, when we don't know where to take that first step, we kind of just like walking aimlessly around saying, I know I'm supposed to do this, but I'm not really sure. So having just
Yeah.
a little bit of guidance will certainly help, especially for our parents who are supporting our student athletes as they really focus and hone in on their nutrition game.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing I do want to add, Sarah, is that at the collegiate level, not every college has a sports dietitian. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, most don't. Most do
Right.
not. Your big schools, your Power Five universities should have them by now. Like I said, I worked at Florida State and I worked at the University of Georgia. So, they have big nutrition departments. And if you're on a recruiting visit, you can ask about that. Definitely ask about that. Do you have a dietitian on staff? The universities that might not have a sports dietitian might still have a dietitian as far as like university health center.
Sure.
So that's still something important to know. I know when I went to college and I was a student athlete, we did not have a sports dietitian or a nutrition department with athletics, but we did have somebody that we could consult with. She was a campus dietitian.
Hmm.
And that was important just to have that as a resource, have that as an option. Um, and that might play a role in your decision making, especially if you're somebody who in high school, I'm going to speak to clients I work with that know that they have disordered eating or eating disorders. Like, you're going to want that support
Yes.
to follow you throughout. And of course, you can, hire people like me on your own terms, and
Right.
you don't have to do anything associated with the university, but it is nice to have that support through the university and that sports medicine department.
Yes, and that is such great advice. We talk a lot about what to look for on a visit. Who do we need to talk to? What questions do we ask? And that's a question we definitely want to have conversations with the coaches and the coaching staff about, is how is the nutrition supported? And it might be, like Lindsey was saying, like it might be someone in the sports science department who is a nutritionist, but maybe they're not hired directly through athletics, especially for our smaller institutions. So really diving deep into this and having these conversations is wonderful, so that kind of what you're up against as you move to the next level.
Absolutely. In addition to my own business, I do some contracting with a local university right now, and it's, I'm not hired full time, but if there's any student athlete that needs me, I'm there for them. I'll hop on the phone with them, Zoom with them, text with them. I'm only saying that because of COVID. Normally I'd be on campus in
Right.
person, which I will be again next year. And the coaches too, the coaches reach out to me to say, you know what, our team isn't doing so hot right now.
Yeah.
Can you come in and talk to us? And I'll go in and talk to them. So just knowing that your university might have that resource is important.
It's so, so valuable. And Lindsey, thank you so much for being here. As we wrap up our conversation, the podcast is called Confessions from the Sidelines. So
Yeah.
I would love to know, what is your favorite memory from standing on the sidelines?
Okay, so I'm sure I have so many. And I played soccer when I was younger. I stopped in high school and transitioned to other sports. And I'm sure I have a lot from that. But in high school and college, I was a track athlete, right?
Yeah.
So the sidelines thing, I was really thinking about it because I'm like, wow, I had a track meet. Like there's so much going on.
That's
It's
right.
all day. There's all these different events to watch. And I had this memory pop in my head, which is hilarious and awful. At the time, I was a sprinter, even though I'm a distance runner now. I was a sprinter. I did 400 hurdles, pole vault, 400 meters. And so when the distance events came on a track, and you're running a 5K on a track, just 400 meters, and you have to run 3 miles. I mean, I should know this. How many laps is it? 20 something laps. It's a ridiculous number. So us sprinters would help count the laps for these poor girls who are just running, or the 10K. Oh, it was the 10K. I got it wrong, Sarah.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
the 10K. It was 6-mile race on the track.
Oh,
So these poor girls are taking, 35, 40 minutes, like the whole meet is slowed down, and we're counting numbers, and we're bored, and we're, checking off like how many laps. And then we're thinking, well, she's right behind the other girl. And then we get distracted and we chit chat. And then we're like, wait, somebody passed. Wait, who's
oh
in front
no.
of who now? And I just remember this one meet that I was like, this poor girl's laps I was counting. I was like, I don't know if laps right. I don't know if she finished a lap early or if I made her run an extra lap, but there was one meet in particular where I was not a good lap counter. And that is my confession.
Oh, wow. Hopefully she didn't have to run further than necessary.
I hope so too. Hopefully I had her run one less lap. I don't know.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I can't imagine doing that. I know that those athletes are born to do that. So
yeah. Oh, racing a 10K is great, but on a track.
Totally different.
Yeah, totally different. And then the people counting the laps, getting confused, doing their little tick marks on their pen and paper pad. It's like, you can't get distracted on the sidelines.
Oh, you cannot. And I think that is the perfect way to end our conversation as we move forward, because distractions are everywhere. And that comes down to nutrition, your mental health, and even your athletic game. So making sure that we have everything where we need to have it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you again, Lindsey, and we will see you soon.
Okay.